Let us have a moment of quiet. Grant us, we ask, to speak, to hear, and to learn, so that our fears may be banished, our minds may become enlightened, our faith be increased, and our steps directed towards you. Amen. The genesis for this morning's share comes from a former classmate of mine who's now retired. There's a thing that UU clergy gets sent to kind of get you thinking, and Jim Germanian, who was at Union Theological Seminary, he sent this thing out, and it really annoyed me because I thought, I really ought to pay attention to this, and I can't not do this any longer. He said he went to this big thing out on the West Coast. There's a big sign that said, "No politics. No politics, please." And he said, that is a problem because a lot of us have purposely not mentioned anything political. And he says, we've dropped the ball. And I'm thinking, okay, this is really annoying because what he's saying is true. And I hate when people say something, you read it, it's true. So I want to approach this from a different point of view. First of all, we have, whether we like it or not, a tradition that involves itself with people getting themselves in all kind of trouble. Jeremiah, you heard what Jared read. Jeremiah, the first thing says, did you practice justice? Have you paid attention to the alien? That's known, by the way, as an immigrant. Have you paid attention to the alien? There's all kinds of preaching in the Old Testament about aliens, all kinds. Did you pay attention to women? Did you pay attention to justice? Did you pay attention to any of that? Because if you haven't, thus says the Lord. And when the prophets speak in the old time, thus says the Lord, you know you're in trouble. Then we come to Amos. I have to set the setting for you because nobody gets this today. Imagine you were going to a stained glass. Oh, I love this. Imagine you're going to a stained glass building, the dark wood, the whole bit, right? When I say a shepherd and a dresser of sycamore trees, that doesn't work. So let me see if I can make it brutally bad, how bad this is. When you're a shepherd, you sleep on the ground at night. There is no shower. There was no deodorant back then. We're clear about that. There were no mani-pedis. You didn't oil your hair. That's for the wealthy. So imagine somebody who sleeps in their underwear, whatever that is, and a cloak, and it's not washed, but maybe once a year, if at all. They're sleeping on the ground most of the time, which means they have gross feet by our standards. They're wearing simple sandals. Their feet are loaded with calluses. Their hands are loaded with calluses. Their face is blasted from the sand and the sun. That's why the beards, which did not, by the way, were trimmed. They were what they were. Your hair, I can't even think about what your hair was like. Those of you who are complaining about hair days, go back 2,700 years ago and be 6 miles south of Bethlehem in a very gross part of dry area, sleeping with animals day in and day out, and he said he was a dresser of sycamore trees. Nobody understands what that is. Why would you? A sycamore tree was where you got really nasty fruit. The only people who ate it were the poor. And you had to crack the fruit open with your hand, and it left calluses and blood on your hand. So you're getting somebody who smelled, had dirt under their fingernails, terrible looking feet, a beard that was out to here, a thing that had never been washed, and he hikes 8 to 10 days to go from Tekoa, south of Bethlehem, all the way up to Bethel. Now imagine you're walking into, I would love to bend it in a way. You walk into Bethel, and this is like the wealthy king's temple. It is the place of the kingdom of Israel, and you walk in looking like that. Hello? Now, lest it make any, I can't mention this because it's on tape here. There is a well-known, very wealthy congregation in this town. The chairman of the board asked me years ago, since she was chairman of the board, asked me if I would go and attend that church one Sunday. So I came in a Brooks Brothers shirt, button down, just a shirt and khakis, and I sat in the middle of the sanctuary, and a usher came up and said, "You know, I don't think you'll really belong here." Takes me out of the sanctuary and sits me on a pew in the back so I could look in the through the doors down the aisle. I was so mad, and I thought, wait a minute. Now you know what it's like to be discriminated against. Now you're getting a glimpse of what classism is, getting a glimpse of what being a different ethnic group is. You're not fit enough. You're not dressed well enough. If I told you the name of this sanctuary, of this church, it's still here. Well, I can't. I'd probably get sued. But I'm just saying you would be. And I told the chair of this, and she almost had a heart attack. So if I came in a Brooks Brothers shirt and slacks, imagine Amos coming in, having lost ever to this, and he says to Amos says to him, "You have treated the poorly bad. You have engaged in robbery. You have engaged in taking from the poor. You have engaged in usury. And the Lord says, you will pay for this." And Amaziah says, "Oh, no, we won't. You're out of here. You will not come back. You go back to Judah, go back with the sheep herders." And he says, then you didn't read the second part. He says, "Your wife will become a hoe in the city. Your kids will die. You're going to die in a foreign land, and they're going to take your land and divide it amongst the invaders. You do not go against justice." Whoa. So we have a long history of people speaking their mind about what is just and fine, good and fine. And people then come and say, "Well, Kenneth, you're forgetting. Jesus got the silver, and he says, we'll give to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God's what is God." There's a separation. One of my Middle Eastern colleagues said to me, "You know, you guys never get this right unless you're from the Middle East. It was understood when you said, give to God's what is God's and give to Caesar's what is Caesar's. The understanding was that Caesar did not belong in Judea or the Galilee. So therefore you give him his coin to go back where he belonged." It was a very, very harsh statement about get out of here. So when you say it was a separation, Jesus was making it extraordinarily clear, this is Caesar's. You go tell Caesar to take what is Caesar's and to leave. This is God's. This is God's land and has been for a very, very, very long time. It was a very, very powerful political statement. So we have this intersection. Jeremiah preached to kings of Judah and Israel. Amos did the same. And so we get this whole thing about religion and politics, but we have a problem. And I have them written down here. By the way, we tend to forget, in the Revolutionary War, who led the fight against the English? Our congregational forebears in New England. Our Presbyterian forebears in Pennsylvania and New York. What about Prohibition? You want to talk about religion and politics. Prohibition was the triumph of the Methodist Church. What about the Scopes trial and evolution? That was the triumph of the Southern Baptist Convention. So you talk about religion and politics, but we have this thing somehow. Martin Luther King wrote his thing from letters from Birmingham jail. He said, the problem with the white church The middle class churches, we don't want to upset anybody. Because if you say anything, you'll get everybody upset. People will leave. God forbid somebody leaves because you spoke truth to power. God forbid somebody gets ticked off because you actually said something that was true. And you're upset because they left. What about the problems we have? Talk about religion and politics. What about civil rights? When we had people marching in civil rights, did you notice who wasn't marching? Middle class pastors. Bishops were, because they couldn't get fired. They weren't getting fired. Senior ministers of large congregations like Riverside Church, who were really into that. But most of your average, good old American Protestant churches wouldn't dare. Didn't want to ruffle feathers. Didn't want to find yourself without a job. And what about abortion? How many pastors really speak up honestly about choice? I'll say something about political choice. I understand people who do not believe in abortion. What I don't understand is then why you're going to be the same people then, when a woman gives birth, give no money for what happens after the baby's born. I hear this, there will be no abortion. I said, fine. Then what are you going to do after the baby's born? Where is their health care provided for the woman and the child? Where are the money provided for feeding the child? Where is a sense of education provided so the child gets a good nurturing early on at 2 and 3 and 4 so the child can be integrated in society? You find out those that are against abortion are also somehow very short in the pocketbook. First ones to argue against WIC. First ones to argue against food stamps. First ones who want to shut down Head Start. I said, so what do? You'll have a baby and then you abandon the baby. What kind of justice is that? So I'll tell it the way it is. What kind of justice is it? So we have people leave, people stop giving, God forbid. Now, of course, a congregation like this, which is dirt poor, nothing from nothing leaves nothing. We're kind of insulated with terms of people not giving. We don't have any money, which is a blessing in a way. The famous thing, I've heard this when I first started the ministry. Kenneth, make haste slowly. We need time. Martin Luther King said, time? How much more time do you need? We've had slaves here for hundreds of years. How much more time do you need? How much more time? It's a very elusive thing. And finally, what about gays? I still never understood the whole thing with gays. I went to Union Theological Seminary, and I remember the first semester I was there, the whole music school was gay. A ton of my colleagues were gay. I didn't understand it. People were people. I met people. And I very quickly decided the label doesn't make any sense to me. There are straights. I wouldn't want my living room, let alone my house or on my yard. And they're gay. So I just never understood the thing about gay versus straight. And let me make something else very clear while we're about it. You realize there have been gay clergy forever. The question is whether they're going to be honest about it. So let me just share some things with you. What this is not. This is not a consecration of one political group over another. This is not suddenly suggesting we become the Democratic Party of prayer. If the Democrats were so smart, the present president wouldn't be in office. Why? Because the latest studies show that if the Democrats had gone and voted, 144,000 of them, Hillary would have been the president, not the present president, but the Democrats didn't vote. Don't get mad at the Republicans. They showed up. The Democrats did not, and that's how he got elected. You're mad about you think the Democrats are great? Do you know why we have the present governor we have? Because the Democrats in Broward and Palm Beach County did not turn out the way they ordinarily turned out, and that's why Gillum lost by the little bit he did. If they had turned out the way they were supposed to, so don't tell me the Democrats are the answer to everything. By the way, don't forget John F. Kennedy and Fiddle and Faddle. Anybody remember who they are? If you haven't heard who Fiddle and Faddle were, you ought to look up the two secretaries he was famous with. Fiddle and Faddle was the Secret Service name, and the rest of the other stuff. No one party has the answer to everything. So don't look for this today to be a consecration of one party over the other. Let us also remember there are Republicans who stand up for justice. And let us remember, I don't know if you're aware of the statistics, we hear evangelicals support our present president. but you didn't hear the other statistics. 20% of evangelicals have absolutely refused to back the president. Second statistic, they did a study and they asked churchgoers, do you go to church once a week, once a month, a couple of times a year? Virtually all the evangelicals that go to church weekly did not vote for our president. What you asked, you're evangelical. This is the answer. I believe in Jesus. You may have no idea what that means, but I believe in Jesus and I believe in the Bible. Have you ever really read anything about the Bible? I don't need to know anything about it. I know the Bible. And I know Jesus, and that's all I need to know. But you ask the churchgoers who go weekly, did not vote and refused to vote for him. So let's not get the wrong idea of what I'm talking about today. What I am talking about is what Gerbanian said in his note that really ticked me off. Love without justice is not love. Compassion without deeds is not compassion. And faith without action is not faith. Let me say that again. Love without justice is not love. Compassion without deeds is not compassion. And faith without action is not faith. We need to talk out. If we have a set of principles about what we believe in, then we ought to mention climate change. We are killing our own planet. And to come up with this nonsense, you find out the people who are against climate change happen to have a lot of money invested on the very things that are killing our climate. You need to call it out. You want to call things out. We need to be honest about Muslims. Are all Muslims bad? I teach Muslims all the time. To blanket one group of people under a stereotype is everything you and I are against. There are people in this room who go into stereotypes. A lot of us in this room could fall into stereotype. Gay, Hispanic, this, that, something else, elderly, whatever. There are all kinds of stereotypes out there. Do those stereotypes work for anybody here? No. Well, they don't work for Muslims either. They don't work for Muslims either. And by the way, some interesting things about Muslims. I had a bunch of Kuwaitis last semester. Did you know Kuwait has the largest group of Christian refugees in the Middle East? They have sprawling Christian communities because they opened their doors to Iraqi Christians and Iran Christians. And they have a huge Christian community now, and they get along fine. They, as Muslims, open the doors. It turns out there are all kinds of Muslim communities that we never hear about. The caravan. We keep on hearing about caravan of immigrants. Has anybody here done a DNA study of themselves? If I hear one more time, you are exceptional. Let me conclude that for you. You are exceptionally mixed. I will give you, by the way, if we're going to talk about immigrants, everybody in this room is an immigrant, according to my background. My grandfather is full-blooded Iroquois, Mohawk. My father is half. But I am not 25%. Nobody's pure. It turns out the Iroquois, Mohawks, had, let's see if I can put this delicately since I'm on tape here, had lots of moments with the English and the French. Even the Native Americans aren't pure. So my DNA comes back 14%. I thought it would at least be 25. No, my first cousin did the same thing. She was appalled. I said, you know, in the 17 and 1800s on the frontier, things happened. They didn't get written down. It's the way it was, the way it still is. We are exceptionally mixed. When I see the president's in-laws get shut in the front door as immigrants, and no questions are asked, and then I see people who are fleeing persecution, you don't have to be in favor of immigration, but nowhere do you separate kids from their parents. And then you lose track of where they belong. Do you realize right now we have several thousand children who we've lost track of who their parents are? Where is that an American ideal? Where is that an ideal of a religious person that you separate a kid from a parent? You may disagree, but we have a legal system set up where you ask for asylum. It doesn't say you rip a child away from its parent. Where does a religious person accept that? Where? A religious person. Now, if you claim you're not religious, fine, but a religious person, who accepts that? Nowhere in our history as a biblical people, or as a humanist people, or as an atheist people, does anybody accept that as a way of behavior. What about women? The treatment of women is still unacceptable. And when I see the way women get hit in the marketplace today, whether you're a teacher, whether you're working at any kind of, you're held to a double standard. Women are always judged more harshly than men. So I'm just saying we have not treated women well. That's not part of our religious community either. And we do a wink and nod at supremacists. No president of the United States should wink and nod at white supremacists or any type of supremacist. This is, unless I looked at this last, a country for all people. We, the people. It does not mean we, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Which kind? What does it mean? It means everybody here. Everybody. You don't say when that massacre hits in Charlotte, well, you know, it takes two. Really? And you saw where that head of the paper in Alabama said we need the Ku Klux Klan to ride again. This is the latest statistics says hate crime suffer in this country likes we haven't seen in a century. So my thing is this. If you're going to be religious people, I don't believe in siding with one party over the other. That to me is ludicrous. The Democrats are not going to get consecrated today. Neither are the Republicans or the independents. As a religious person, you have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to look at what's around us and to speak up. Because if you don't speak up, nobody's going to speak up. And if nobody speaks up, that means everybody's agreeing. So I think we've been too long, too quiet. I have been too long and too quiet. There's a way to speak up of what are our core principles and values. And if it means sometimes you have to step on toes, isn't that what religious communities do? We step on each other's toes to keep us honest with what we say we believe. And I think that's a good lesson for all of us. I should have had this sermon if I'm such a smarty. I should have had this sermon years ago. So I do what I'm doing in my old age. It's better late than never. But at least we're having it, and we'll have a lot more. And may God step on all of our toes. Amen.